and find the button.
Quite organized enough to get the previous session in this room.
Cool. So we might as well get started. I think it's about 10 past, running a little late, but hopefully everybody had a good first session. So hello everyone. I'm going to talk today about the benefits of contributing, along with some details, kind of a case study look at Mediacurrent's Contrib First policy and Contrib committee efforts. So my name is Damien McKenna. I'm a community lead at Mediacurrent. I'm also heavily involved in the Drupal community, and for a year period starting June 2015 to June 2016 ended up being the second most heavily contributing person on Drupal.org. So you can find me online as Damien McKenna. My Drupal.org account is Damien McKenna. And if you Google for that name, you usually find me. Anyway, but you might more recognize me with the bunny ears. So, close this pop-up. Here we go. So I work with Mediacurrent. It's a company based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We're a mostly remote company with people all over the country. We build highly impactful sites based around Drupal, but we also get heavily into content marketing, design efforts, usability, accessibility, etc. So this ended up being a little long, and like I said, I will turn this into a blog post because after the fact realized this would work better as a blog post maybe. So the short take is if you depend upon open source depends upon you. So today I'm going to cover a couple of different topics. And the first one we're going to look at is 9 common problems that I see people and businesses running into. So some recent scenarios. The first one is an organization deciding they needed a new PM standard. So they realized their existing project management processes aren't quite working the way they wanted. So they decide to create a new process and then realize, oh wait, there's a thing called Scrum. Let's try that instead. So they use an existing standard. Another one is a design process, design standard. So the existing design processes aren't quite working the way they want. So let's do a new process. And oh wait, there's this thing called Flexbox. Let's try that instead. And hey, it works great. So an existing standard. So building Drupal sites, we come into situations where we need custom functionality, decide, let's build a custom module that it could be completely reusable. It's not client specific, but it's this tool that we've built for this one client. We decide to keep it to ourselves, keep it to the client, don't reuse it. And then long term, the client and us have more code to maintain. Another one is somebody hacked something. So again, a change that was made that wasn't client specific. It was a fairly generic change. Nobody took the time to look into, had somebody else come across this problem before and needed to fix it? And over time, you've got a hacked code base, hacked module in the Drupal parlance. And then you've got maintenance problems because somebody hacked up this thing. Another one is where somebody decided to make a change, went through some process to find out, well, let's make a change to an existing thing. So they come up with a file to properly separate their changes from the original code in a patch format. And they decide, well, we'll upload the changes later. Maybe, because as often happens, they get to the end of the project and somebody else comes along and says, we need you to focus on this project now, forget about that other one. And the original project then has maintenance problems because we've got this change that was made that was never uploaded. The maintainers of the original code base of the shared code base that was changed don't know somebody came up with this really useful fix, a really useful improvement, because it's sitting in a server somewhere. Then you come up with unnecessary code where somebody decides, I want this custom widget for doing this thing, but they don't, and it's just for this one client. It doesn't matter if there are existing standards, existing tools for this, because then they've got wasted effort. They didn't take the time to see, is there an existing solution for this problem? Then run into occasions where you have duplicate efforts. This is 7A. There's another one. There's a duplication of the duplicate efforts. So one thing that came up at work was somebody had ideas for standardizing design components at the theme level. And while they were building this one project, thought, you know, this would be a fairly good reusable thing, but didn't take the time to separate it. They built it just for that one client. 6 months later, somebody else said, hey, I just built this set of really useful reusable components. And the first person said, I built that 6 months ago. If there'd been some communication, there wouldn't have been wasted effort. There could have been more sites reusing it and building a better single solution. And the duplicates of a custom data import system where there was an existing system. In this case, somebody had a Drupal 7 module that did this thing they wanted, but they hadn't announced or put any effort into updating it to Drupal 8. So the person said, okay, I'm going to build that in Drupal 8, but I'm not going to tell anybody. 6 months later, discover, oh, the original developers actually went and did all of the porting work themselves as well. So now we have two almost exact duplicates for the same functionality. One of them is out there and being used by other people and being improved in a community. And then there's this thing. So again, wasted effort. And then we get into more standardized or more commonly known things. Thing called the tragedy of the commons. It goes back to a lot of concepts around having shared resources and people not putting the effort into maintaining it. So if you have everybody using something, but people not supporting it, people not putting in the effort to maintain it, to deal with bug reports, to deal with requests, to deal with support, over time, the project can die from the lack of support, the lack of maintenance. And so then you can discover 2 years later, this really critical piece I needed isn't supported anymore, and I can't find it because it was deleted, the repository is gone, who knows what happened. But I need it for my site. And another one is the not invented here syndrome, where we will only trust our content management platform, our JavaScript framework, our processes, our standards, our languages, our operating systems, our hardware. To what degree do you take that? So you may have seen this before. A wonderful comic from the wonderful XKCD, where you have the situation of there are all these standards for this one thing. Let's try and build one unifying standard that they'll all use. Then you have one more standard for the same thing. This happens so many times. So what you'll find is that we're creating our own problems. We're creating technical debt that we have to follow up on later, where the scenario of the person going through the correct process and creating this patch file to upload so other people can benefit from it, but not taking the time to do it then when they had created the file, and then getting pulled away, never coming back to doing the cleanup. The needless duplication of people not communicating and finding out, oh, I'm working on this thing too. And instead of saying, hey, let's collaborate and build a better hammer, they're building two different hammers. It also leads to somebody maintaining the system long term and needing to know more domain specific, not having more domain specific knowledge, having to know more about the customizations and the custom things in this system, rather than, well, I've used this thing on a different client, I know exactly what to do. And then you've got higher maintenance costs because you've got more stuff to maintain. And that, to a degree, can lead to employee dissatisfaction because, say, at a dev shop like where I work, you've got people rotating between different projects and new projects coming on and old ones moving on and whatever. And people will be brought onto a new project and they'll see, oh, they built another thingy widget. We already had one. Why didn't we just use that? And it can lead to a lot of frustration and canu. So the notion is that if we take a step back and realize that creating reusable things, if that by not creating reusable things, we're making problems for ourselves later. So those are the problems. Let's take another look at some of the other issues involved in this and employers versus employees. So one thing with employers that they want to maintain stability in their company. They want to maintain stability in the systems that their business requires. If it's a store selling stuff, they want their point of sale systems and their e-commerce stuff to keep working. They don't want it to go down. If they've got a brick and mortar building, they don't want that to burn down. They want to maintain stability. They want to maintain the stability of their infrastructure. They don't want their servers going down. They don't want the sidewalks in front of their building to, I don't know, be dug up or something. They want to be able to maintain stability within their business. And they don't want to have to deal with insane costs because their building burned down. So it all ends up in a cycle. So they also then want to help maintain and improve productivity of their employees. And there's the simple notion that people who are motivated will do better work. If they're happy, they will, if they're happy and motivated, they won't be staring out the windows for hours all day instead of focusing on the work. So obviously then, if people are working better, you'll have better income. There'll be less time wasted, get more done, therefore have ultimately more income, which again goes back to maintaining the business. So the question is how to motivate your staff. On the flip side, employees want to enjoy the work they're doing. They don't want to hate going to work every day. They don't want to think that the last thing I want to do in the morning when I get up is go to work. They want to have a reason to come to work. They want to make a difference in the world, hopefully. So another part is that employees would like to have some control, some self-determination over their careers, to be able to control their destiny to a degree. So there's a wonderful talk that's only like 20 minutes long, you should look up, from Dan Pink, a TED talk he gave, on motivation. And it turns out that motivation is something that has been studied in the business world for decades. I mean, there are reams of books, obviously lots of talks about it. There are plenty of known practices and best practices on motivating people. And there are basically two motivators. There are two types of motivators. There are extrinsic, which is if you do more work, you'll get more pay, or you'll get a company car, or more vacation time, whatever. Then there are intrinsic, internal things, like things that will make you feel better about your job, about your career, that help promote job satisfaction. And they found that extrinsic motivators only work to a certain point. There's a certain cutoff level where throwing more money at a person doesn't make them work better. It can start turning into a bell curve where more money results in less productivity. So they started to realize maybe the intrinsic piece is, at a certain point, it is what takes over to help motivate people. So there are several what are called primary intrinsic motivators. Autonomy, to have, I'll get into that. So autonomy, mastery, purpose. Autonomy is, for the benefit to an employer, is you might discover new opportunities. Sorry, I missed a piece. So autonomy is the people having control to make decisions for themselves. So for an employer, has time to start, looking at things from maybe a different perspective, approaching things with a different idea or a different mindset. They might come up with new ideas. If your company is product-based, they might think of a completely new product. But instead of hammering away on the same hammer design, they might think, hey, maybe if we get a piece of metal and put these jagged pieces, we can have a saw. I think they cut stuff and we can have a hammer and a saw. For the employee, it helps keep work interesting. You're not just making that one hammer all day. You might think of another idea for, hey, piece of metal, saw. So another one is mastery, the idea of getting the time to become better at your trade. So for an employer, you want your staff to be more skilled because they'll do better work. There's the old joke of what happens if we train everybody and they decide to leave. Well, the flip side is if you don't train people, they'll stay. So then the benefit to employees is that you become more skilled and you gain more mastery and get more satisfaction because you're getting better at your work. And then it can also help with purpose. So you gain more personal satisfaction in what you're doing. Benefit then to employer is, well, your infrastructure improves because of the work is getting better, so things are improving. Benefit to the employee is your job satisfaction is going to increase. You're happier with your work. So here's a possible solution. Contribute to open source. Open source can provide autonomy. You get a chance to scratch your own itch. You have some ability to master your trade. You can improve skills over time because you're getting to do different things. And then there's a certain purpose in open source because you're contributing code to the general public. Everybody can use it. If you are, again, going back to the Drupal thing, if a giant company is spending millions of dollars on building improvements for this CMS tool that is open source, then a tiny little organization or a nonprofit that you like, they have the same chance to use those same improvements. They're not being locked away in a server in a vault somewhere, in a private code base, never to see light of day outside of their offices. Everybody can benefit. Every user of these systems can benefit. So one way of looking at it is you can turn the autonomy motivator into what many businesses call internal time. So you might have heard of Google's 20% time, though in reality often that turned into 120% time. Atlassian, the company that makes Jira and Bitbucket and Jira, they started a thing where they gave 20% of their staff time to do their own thing. And they had tremendous success with that. Mediacurrent, where I work, we have roughly, things are in a bit of flux at the moment, but we have roughly 10%-ish time to do our own things, to work on blog posts, to work on contributed projects, etc. And WordPress had a thing a few years ago where they had an initiative called 5 for the Future, where they were trying to get any company that was involved in WordPress to give 5% of their time or 5% of their profits to the greater community. So if people were in a position to have 5 hours or 5% of your work week, which would be 2 hours a week, to let the staff spend 2 hours a week doing whatever they wanted. And they had some success with that, but as always with open source systems, there's always an uphill battle. So some of this comes back to a notion of contributing first. So at Mediacurrent, we look at it from this perspective. So the idea is to work with existing solutions. When you have to do a thing, to not think, well, okay, to build this I need to, but to take a step back and look to see if anybody else has done this. If there are existing systems or solutions or code or process or whatever that do what you need to do. So existing code, processes, standards, to basically avoid needless duplication. Instead, make the existing systems better. So how do you do this? So you seek to improve, not replace. Don't build a new hammer. Help make the existing hammer designs better. Decide, hey, if we put this curly thing in the back, we can take out the nails we did wrong and put in a replacement. So look for existing solutions and make improvements where you can see improvements might be needed. So the process getting into a day-to-day, you look to see, does this particular thing I find match my requirements? Need to interact with other people in that community early on, and then I may have duplicated this, and then upload your pull requests, etc. sooner, so you can again go back to the community interaction to help improve things. By doing this, you're working with other people. You're working not just within your company, your sphere of influence. You can be working with people in completely different companies, completely different countries, who have a very different perspective on things. Something that might work for you, you might discover from somebody else, if you tweak it just a little bit, it can cover all these other use cases as well. So you're improving things by working together. Going back to a presentation we just came from, well, I just came from, on diversity of thought, of having more diversity of people with the different backgrounds, the different needs, working together will come up with a better solution. And then you can fix things. Then at the same time, you're reducing your own technical debt. You're not having to maintain all of these custom processes, custom code bases long term. You have pushed some of it uphill to a greater community. So you can kind of consider open source software to be somewhat democratic. So people who get involved in the process to improve things help steer the ship. And then when everybody contributes, everybody benefits. And just to be clear, I'm not just talking about code. It's code, yes. Software, there's going to be code. But designs, UX research, documentation, project management, funding, daycare, meetups, running events like this, you may not have a single idea of what a for loop is, but helping to run events or do documentation means that other people who are working code can focus on that, and you can focus on this and just make it all better together. So a couple of mantras I want to look at. The first one is, can this be reused? And by that I mean, yes, code obviously, but there are documentation and processes. Is the thing I want to come up with, can somebody else benefit from it? It could be, say, presentations, slideshows. Another one is, can this thing I found, instead of, first mantra, can this be reused? So if yes, okay, we'll create a thing and upload and other people use it. If we're using something else from somebody, can it be improved? So what can be improved? Code, obviously, documentation and processes. You find some documentation on a site somewhere, and very often open projects will have ways of submitting improvements. Or maybe you see some slideshows and somebody had some duplicate slides, and you come back later and say, you didn't need that piece because you covered it later on. Or maybe you take their idea and make your own that is even better. So another mantra is to don't postpone, to not postpone your involvement. So thou shalt not search later. Don't put off looking for a solution somebody else has built. Don't decide to build yours and look later. Start with a search. And if you have questions, don't delay in posting your questions. Ask sooner. You might find somebody else who has the same bugs, the same requirement that you can collaborate with. And when you're in a position of uploading changes or uploading an improvement or something, don't wait until the end. Do it immediately, because you might get an interaction with somebody else that helps make it better. Or they may say, well, actually, if you do it this other way, change your process like this, you don't even need all of these changes. And again, save yourself long-term maintenance. Again, upload modules. So businesses should start seeing open source as an investment. It's an investment in their stability, their future. It's an investment in their staffing, in the infrastructure. One of the things I looked into was what is considered a minimum investment for long term. So if you're investing for retirement, a common minimum requirement is to invest 10% of your income. So turn that around into 10% of your staff's time. 10% of your 40-hour week is 4 hours. So it could be, say, a Friday evening, Friday afternoon. Everybody gets all of their work done, and then you get together on Friday and do some collaboration together. And you give your staff the time to scratch their own itches. So for employers, you really need to promote a Contrib First mantra. And not only that, not only promote the mantra, but allow your staff time to contribute on their own. And then at the same time, don't push it on people to do all of that kind of thing on their spare time. It shouldn't be Google's 120% time. It should be 20% of the 100. So for employees, when you're building something, work with a Contrib First mindset. Is there an existing solution for my problem? Is there a 90% solution for my problem, or even a 50% that I could help collaborate with to improve? And if your employer doesn't allow you time to do some Contrib time, some internal time, see if you could request it, ask to have some time. And also, don't feel the pressure to do open source work on your spare time. Your personal time outside of work is yours. If it's a hobby and you enjoy doing it and you don't have other demands, then that's fine. But don't feel that you have to. If you have family members to take care of, deal with your family members. If you have elderly family to take care of, deal with that. If you have a family, if you have children to play with and whatnot, play with your children. But don't feel that you have to, that you're being pressured into doing all of this extra stuff on the side. And there was a presentation from George Fong in last year where he said the cavalry is not coming. You are the cavalry. There isn't going to be somebody else who fixes these problems for you. You are the cavalry, act accordingly. So we are the cavalry. Contrib First. So to give you a little insight into Mediacurrent's Contrib Committee, as we call it, it started in January 2015. So it's been going for just over 2 years at this point. And one of the main things that we do is to track the progress, to track what we're already doing. And it's turned out to be great for PR. And it helps advance the Drupal ecosystem. The time that we put into internal time into improvements in the Drupal ecosystem helps improve it as a whole. So starting the committee, I had a couple of goals. So the first one is obviously promote the notion of contributing first, and wanted to help train and mentor and encourage other people to do likewise. People who didn't know the processes of contributing within the Drupal community or other open source communities. And then a big part of it was to track the progress. So I do a monthly blog post promoting the things that we've done the previous month, some of which comes from our internal time, some of which comes from clients paying us to make improvements that are then shared back to the community. And to really promote the work we're doing so other people are aware of it. Also, both internally and externally. So we've had a lot of successes. We've had a greater awareness of the Contrib First process and mantra. And we've increased development and contributions to the Drupal ecosystem. We've made a lot of improvements in all of these modules in the Drupal world. Whole bunch more. We've had 26 blog posts reporting on what we've been up to. And it's actually had a dramatic effect, well, a noticeable effect on our sales. Some of our clients have liked the fact that we stick around and maintain some of these projects long term. We don't just come along, build some new fancy saw and throw it out and leave it to stagnate. We continue long-term maintenance of these projects. It also helps with, on Drupal.org, there's this marketplace page where all sorts of different Drupal agencies from around the world are all listed. And there it keeps track of the different company listings, and it keeps track of the work that has been done by the company. So when you say upload a patch, there's a way of indicating I am working for this company. And you can go to the next level and say it's working for this company for this client if you need to. And that all comes back to the marketplace page where it shows how many people say they work for your company, how many improvements, documentation pages, new projects, case study articles, etc., have been written and created by the people who say they work for your company. And then on the marketplace page, the company names are all listed in this order based upon, I think it's the number of commits, the number of case studies. There are a couple of other factors, but Mediacurrent has consistently ranked in the top 10. And for a company that has 70-ish people, we're ranking higher than companies with hundreds of people who just aren't putting effort into contributing back. And when prospective clients are looking for somebody to build a system for them, to maintain something for them, this is one of the factors that they'll consider. So if you work at a company, try starting your own Contrib committee. Promote a Contrib First mantra, and track your progress, because you'd be surprised how much your staff might be doing already without really realizing it. And promote your work both internally and to other people, and then encourage other people to do likewise. And then also really get into training and mentoring. Make sure that people working with tools are able to work with the tools. If you are working with Drupal, make sure that you know how to go through the processes of contributing things. If you're working with WordPress, make sure people know how to contribute. So there is thankfully a wealth of information out there about this. A lady by the name of Nadia Eqbal last year put together a 143-page report on open source and funding of open source projects. It was for the Ford Foundation, and it's well worth taking time to at least skim through. I do recommend reading the whole thing if you have the time. So one of the key quotes was, there were valuable software tools that couldn't be supported by commercial models, and they lacked any form of institutional support, because there wasn't, say, one company maintaining things. There hadn't been a community built up to support it long term. So it goes into free Libre open source software, the history, challenges it faces, sustainability, and points out some opportunities for improving things. There's, again, the presentation from Dan Pink on motivation, a really good article from Angie Byron, who's big in the Drupal community, on the tale of two developers, where she compares two different approaches to contributing. The one person who gets the requirements or makes a decision on what to do, and then disappears into a dungeon for a week to try and come up with the best possible solution to fit the exact use case, and to come out at the end with a finished thing, versus another person who isn't really sure but communicates a lot with other people on, well, how about we try it like this and maybe tweak it like that, and gets a lot of feedback and collaboratively comes up with a better solution after the week. Nadia also did a really good presentation on how to be a good open source citizen, how to get involved, be sustainable. And another good one is Open Source and You from Josh Simmons. Ash Dryden and Model View Culture have both a tremendous amount of really excellent articles on open source communities, different aspects that people might not consider, like the unpaid labor of telling somebody, well, you can just work on that tonight instead of taking care of your kids. of the subtle pressure to always, that if you're involved in open source, that you should always be contributing and always spending time maintaining things, and that ultimately companies are benefiting from people's desires to do that, which is why I strongly promote companies to take it upon themselves to make the decision to invest in their people, in their systems, instead, and give people the time to do so. So in summary, Contrib First, invest 10% of your time, company time, not other time, and generally help where you can. Don't feel it has to be one particular type of contribution. There's plenty of things that can be done. And read more. There's a lot of material out there, especially in Nadia's report. And try to follow the 3 mantras of, can this thing I'm about to build be reused? If it is, approach it from the point of view of, yes, I'm going to be contributing this. Can something existing be improved? The answer will generally be yes. And to work at it from that perspective, and don't delay, don't postpone getting involved in an open source community about different topics. You'll end up with a better solution more quickly by getting involved. So again, if you depend upon open source depends upon you. So any questions?
What if like you have like an obscure project that like you don't really expect that many people to have a desire to contribute to, but and like if it becomes successful, then they may. And like, how do you like get people motivated to contribute to like a specific project? And like, you know, even if like that project like needs a lot of fleshing out in order for it to be realized, and like it's like kind of needs like more entropy or less entropy to for it to be become
right.
I guess how do you motivate other people to contribute to?
That's so. I think there's a recording. The question is, how do you motivate other people to get involved?
Yes.
So that's a very tough nut to crack. A lot of it can be pure chance as to how one thing becomes popular and something else does not. You may have 2 competing things or 20 competing things, and one ends up becoming a de facto standard. 6 months later, or a year later, or 3 years later, just the tides turn to say, SAS is better than less, or whatever. It's starting off with a new project can be very difficult. You may need to try and do some marketing to promote it, and get awareness of it. So in theory, then the more people that are aware of the project, hopefully you'll find somebody who says, oh, I would like a saw that cuts in an angle rather than a straight line or something instead, and decides to help you with it. There's no standard formula that will work for every case.
And like you kind of touched on this a little bit. And like you need like it to be in a like I guess like if you have like this kind of worry that like it's your code it's not like good enough to like have other people be interested in it, and like And like, is there any, would that be a factor in like in getting people to contribute and or getting people to submit it for other people to, and like if it's like just if it's just your beginning code and you have like very disorganized and things like that, but you think it has potential to work, and like should you put more extra effort in the beginning to having it be understandable by others, even though that's going to be a significant deviation from what you're working on, or should you just focus on the code and then hope that other people can
so
Want to repeat the question?
yeah, to repeat the question, how are there? Is it better to make it better initially versus making it more accessible?
yeah,
I would.
and basically like what should you focus your attention on? Should you focus on your attention on getting like a functional application like from the beginning and work on documentation and ease of readability from the beginning, like, or should you focus on getting something that's usable from the beginning and then worry about documentation later?
So if you're trying to get more people involved,
Yeah.
I would say documentation and having some public plans available of what your roadmap is would be better than having it all in your head, but having a 3/4 more functioning system. That you want people to see where you're going with it and to be able to help. If you don't have documentation, it may take them too much effort to try and learn the system and learn how it works before they want to help. And they may decide the effort isn't worth it and go to something else or make their own. Being upfront with your plans as well and showing people this is the direction I want to take it will help people see and understand your vision for the system and will hopefully get people excited and want to help get you there, rather than just saying, oh, it only says hello world. Well, it's going to say hello universe in 2 weeks. Here's the documentation on, here's all of our coding standards and our comments explaining how it works, and the roadmap on getting there. That'll help get people excited and they'll want to, theoretically, be more likely and want to help you than just hello world. So, any other questions?
I think in the spirit of this session, the questions you're asking now are not the first questions you should be asking. First question you should be asking is there something out there that already exists that starts to do what I want? And can I contribute to an existing project rather than starting my own? And only after you've decided that there's nothing out there should you be asking questions you're asking now.
Yes. I was kind of going off of the assumption that those questions have been asked. But yes.
Do you have any anecdotes, advice, or just comments on introducing open source to larger companies that traditionally have shunned open source or found it to be a security problem, or just the culture around hiring, kind of existing employees versus new hires? How can you do it? Or do you just still do you just dive in and let it play out?
I mean, you bring up a couple of interesting aspects to open source and how personally I feel they can be better. The point of view of security, yeah, I see time and time again that either open source projects create a subgroup in their community to focus on security, or they wish they had, and they come up with one after dealing with some major security problems. Speaking of the Drupal community world, we've had a security team for years and have a good track record of getting problems fixed and published and things resolved promptly and pretty well. Of course, that's my biased opinion given I'm on the security team, but yes, we do great. One thing you'll find with hiring is that every system will have its own nuances, its own ways of doing things. If you're working with open source systems, there's a greater chance that somebody else out there has worked with it and will have less time, will take less time to be able to be productive with your systems versus somebody who may never have seen that particular, your company's code styles or architecture before. So there'd be more of a learning curve to getting started. So as for trying to promote that within a company, you could look at it from the perspective that look at what systems out there do the same thing that your stuff does. And if we were using that, what benefits would we have? What problems have we ran into before that they've already solved? What problems have we not even thought of yet that they've already solved? There can be a lot of benefit from approaching it that way. And then put your business hat on it and look and do some calculations of how many months did we spend rewriting this thing or building this thing when another solution already existed that we could have just gone out and grabbed and spend, say, a quarter of the time or maybe half of the time implementing. So that's kind of the approach I like to take it at, that what are we getting that we don't have to build? We don't have to build a hammer. We don't have to get a stick, shape the metal, and put it on and hammer. We can go to a store, pick up a hammer, and then run with it. But you might also check the Nadia Eggwall's report. I believe she covers some of that.
Just to add on to what you were saying, analogy I used before that worked really well. This very non-technical person was trying to tell me how he wanted to custom everything. And I said, all right, let's stop and let's talk Chinese food. It was just before line 3 will start, sort of like right now. And I said, look, we can order the poo-poo platter from this open source community, and you're gonna get free refills of whatever you need, whether it be security patch updates, chicken fingers, whatever. Whatever we want, we can get free because we have this all-you-can-eat poo-poo platter, and it's part of this great community, and we're gonna be full, and life's gonna be good. Or you can get my team to custom make you the forever noodles. And we're gonna have to pay every time we want anything. You want anything else, you're gonna have to pay. And it's gonna be, for this food, $10 every time we decide we want something a little different for this huge group of us eating. And because he was non-technical, he's like, why hasn't anybody ever explained this to me before? And I always use food. But if you can make it, it's so it's about their pain.
Yeah.
And something that they can feel. Because again, in my experiences in the past, I always had to explain this stuff to very non-technical people.
Sure. And I was thinking more to the culture clash. So it's like they get it. I'm talking about our companies that are late to the game on open source, and so they're just hiring like these rock star like open source like coders and developers and architects, UI UX, and they're getting in and they're just having this culture shock where they're hitting this wall of like the old way of doing things, and you just keep throwing like talent at the problem. There's got to be a better way of kind of integrating the two worlds.
So it's the problem that they're hiring people based upon, in part, their open source, their skill within open source communities, but then not letting them use those tools or contribute back.
The existing kind of management or whoever the decision makers are, or the head honcho, whoever is like the big, big kid on the block engineers are kind of browbeating and bullying the new kid on the block because like they're threatened by, they don't get it, they don't understand open source, they've been in kind of like a Microsoft ecosystem, for example. So I'm talking about like big corp finance or other kind of old school industry. So whatever, I don't want to take away.
I don't know, other than time maybe, and wait for that person to find something else or retire.
How much do people really pay attention to the licenses, and should they, and how do you navigate all that? Because as a non-lawyer person, I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna think everything I do in open source, I'm just like, whatever, commit stuff, I'm gonna use it. It's never, ever, 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 ever been a problem. But I feel like it's just this thing that I feel like we all kind of do and don't pay attention to, or maybe a lot of us do, and I'm just an idiot. Like, I don't know anything about it.
No,
You speak to that.
it's one of those things of most people just take for granted of it's open source, so it's okay, without getting into the nuance. And usually, if you're using a specific tool already, you don't have much control over its license. But if you're creating something, and then any contributions you make to that project then inherits the project's licenses. But if you're creating something new, it can become, it's something that you need to take a little time to research, because there can be a lot of nuances. So if you make something BSD license, anybody can take it and they don't have to say you made it. They can take it and bundle it in their own closed source system and slap a price tag, and their customers or whatever are not aware of it. So
there's even tools, there's even workflow tools that are like, here's how to choose a license. And I'm like, I still don't know which license I want at the end of this workflow.
Yeah.
The questions are so, they presuppose so many things. You're like, I don't know, I'm just making a slideshow.
Yeah, and I think that I've like actually like done a little bit of like actually reading of the actual license, and I think it's basically in like, as long as you like make any changes to, you can use it however you want, like in its current form. If you make any changes to it, you need to make that code available. You also need to include that license in anything that you use as well. And like, I mean, from what I understand, you can have. Is it true that you can have like your own code be closed source as long as it's separate from the open source code, and you make and I'm not sure why you would want to. I've seen a lot of companies like that have that, like, if you go to the about and go to the like license information, they have like
depends upon, it depends. It depends upon the type of system. It depends upon the license. So again, back to what I do for trade with web development tools, you'll find very often a lot of them are GPL based or licensed. So that limits the license that code that directly interacts with it. So a plugin for the system inherits its license and can't have a different license. But say, for example, you build a theme or a skin UI, whatever, for that system, the graphics and the JavaScript and CSS could be completely proprietary, but any, say, PHP code that is needed would inherit the GPL. So you can sell the thing and nobody has the right to upload it or redistribute it. They can't upload and redistribute the graphics and the CSS and the JavaScript, but they could the small amount of PHP code. But the system, that your theme or whatever might be completely useless unless you have all of the graphics.
Yeah.
And so you find a lot of companies who have built businesses around creating themes because they can charge for them. Of course, then there's a kickback in WordPress community where after years of people making businesses around that business model, some of the leadership in the WordPress community decided, we don't really want you to do that. We want you to contribute those back because the ecosystem is maybe suffering. But then you, with say desktop applications or more server-side applications where you can have, it kind of goes into how the other code is pulled into your application. You can use an external library because you're dealing with a separate API, kind of. Starts getting into weird nuance on how the application is compiled and distributed. And
Yeah, there's a lot, you can get into wormholes and like,
yeah,
there's like, why can you use CC license for content, but not for code and things like that.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you look for the Nerd17 hashtag, I'll post these online later, the slides and stuff, so you can look at it later. Thank you.